Welcome to Lesson 5 in our course on the principles of strategy. Our theme in this lesson is leadership and strategic change. Fascinating subject. This lesson is part of Unit 3 in our course and relates to Chapter 15 in our course textbook. As always with our video lectures, we have three purposes that we want to fulfill. We want to focus on key concepts in the unit of study. We want to ensure that we provide context for your study and in this as well as your other study materials. And finally, we want to highlight particular areas of interest or importance that need more clarification. This is the exploring strategy framework that we've used throughout this course. And you'll see that Lesson 5 fits into the strategy in action component of the framework. And as I said, this is a fascinating subject. And it's been one that has been studied by scholars and others for decades, centuries, indeed, even millennia. And one of the interesting debates in the scholarly world is around the difference between leadership on the one hand and management on the other. So John Cotter, for example, who is cited in chapter 15 of our textbook, the related chapter to this particular lesson, said famously in his 2001 Harvard Business Review article, "No one has yet figured out how to manage people effectively into battle. They must be led." So he clearly takes the view that leadership and management are very different. The textbook, though, really defines them as being on the same continuum, and so it talks of transformational leadership on one end of the continuum and transactional leadership on the other end of the continuum, and different people could fall anywhere in between these two ends of the spectrum. And indeed, as we'll discover, the text puts forward the position that situational leadership is the best approach, where you place yourself at the appropriate point in this continuum depending on the particular context. But we'll come to that in a moment. So this is where Lesson 5 fits in. We have a number of learning outcomes that we want to achieve. One of them will be number 4, bullet point 4 there on situational leadership, which we'll touch on in this lesson. So let's think about types of strategic change. If you look at this matrix, it has on the one side the speed of change, and this speed could be slow, and it's described as incremental there, or it could be very fast, described as the Big Bang. So that's the one axis. On the other axis, it has the end state of organizational culture. In other words, what is the extent or the impact on the organizational culture of the strategic change that is taking place? Is it merely a realignment, or is it transformational? And depending on the combination of these end results and the nature of the change, you have different categories of strategic change, ranging from adaptation through to revolution, the most drastic of the changes. So this is a theoretical framework and a nice way of thinking about different categories of strategic change. can you think of examples from your own experience or from organizations or other people that you've been exposed to that relate to these different kinds of strategic change? That's important when we look at these frameworks to always relate them to practical experience. Coming to situational leadership, the basic idea here is you match what you do as a leader to the specific situation that is at hand. So again, we have a 2x2 matrix. So on the one side, we have the capability of the organization or people in the organization to change. Is it high or is it low or somewhere in the middle? On the other side, we have the readiness of the organization or people in the organization to change. So people could be very ready, for instance, so readiness could be high, but their capability or ability to change could be quite low, in which case you have to use more of a persuasive leadership style and provide training, coaching, and so on. So that's the basic idea of this. Now, something for you to think about is, from a practical point of view, how easy is it to switch one's leadership style to fit the particular organization? Can you think of any examples from your own experience or observation that relate to this? How is change effected? Well, here are some examples of levers of strategic change. And these come actually from John Kotter's work in an earlier article from 1996, where he identifies eight of these levers. Now, it's all very well to list these levers, but it's important to again be very practical. So if you look at page 487, you'll see there in illustration 15.4 a number of very, very good practical examples of these levers in action. And so some homework for you to think about is, can you think of examples from your own experience or observation? And what are some of the limitations of a framework like this? For example, does it give you any insight about which of these levers you should use when? These are some important things to think about. So to recap, we've looked at different types of strategic changes and discussed matching one's leadership style to the context, and looked at some of the tools that can be used to achieve strategic change. This concludes lesson 5. I hope it's been useful, and I look forward to seeing you and chatting to you when we meet next. Goodbye.